First of all, many, many thanks. I should begin by saying to Jenny Mansbridge, and to my dear and old friend Anis for really superb and extremely helpful comments that I hope I can get in some written form towards the revision of this paper. And I mean that very seriously, because there was a lot in both papers. I hope they will come into our published proceedings. I won't try and take on everything. I can only say that both papers seem to me generally at least consistent with what I was trying to propose, and suggesting elaborations and complications, mainly concerned with the question that I think is recurrent: under what conditions does failure occur or success occur for different kinds of deliberative processes, and under what conditions, let's say, does the right kind of failure occur? Maybe we can also say under what conditions does the wrong kind of success occur? That is something that looks like a resolution, but actually turns out to be a disaster about 5 years later or 10 years later. So I'm deeply grateful for those. I'll just quickly run. I won't try and cover the range of these questions. I don't think we have the time for that, but I'll try and at least react to a few of them. I'm fascinated by, I think, Celestine's observation about the state, to which I'm sympathetic, but I think it really does open up a very big debate, because the question of how one can, let's say, bring some element of deliberation into that level of the operation would be a very important, interesting question. Say in India, where you have a very robust state, there's no way to do things without the state, but how deliberation does or does not enter, and how it should or should not enter at that level, leave aside the lower level, would be a immediate, for me, operational question. But certainly you pose a big one about the overall project of deliberation. And likewise, I think Vinay's, sorry, I couldn't hear your name properly. A huge question to which I don't have an answer, obviously, because it's not a quick fix thing, but I think the kind of line on which we are here might lead us to a more nuanced accounting of when. Indeed, a kind of audit of failure over time, which might give us a slightly different picture of things that over time or in retrospect are more successful. But I'll hold off on that big and I think central question to touch on a few other ones. Just a clarification to your question on song and dance. I certainly didn't mean to pick out those as crucial, but just to stretch the question of how contexts change. These are all people who speak, and speak at length without song and dance, to each other and to politicians. And in each of these contexts, song and dance was not the only thing that happened. Song and dance did something else in addition, because someone like, let's say, Kofi Annan sitting in the UN telling all the NGOs they could, organize their own things outside, has heard speeches from morning and knows how to stay awake while being actually asleep. It makes sense. But when you got 4 South African women on you, there's only so much room you have as Kofi Annan to move. And so it has a very, dare I say it, coercive, performative effect. But you're perfectly right that one should not isolate that as being somehow better. So it just happened to be these examples. But there's a lot of straight speech examples, very powerful ones. So that's just by way of clarification. I think there's an important line that runs through from James Mansbridge's comments through Anis's about the conditions. And I think it recurred as regards the state, I think, in Jerry Mackey's question as well. And I'm recalling that very long ago in the ancient world of the 1960s in the field of political science, late 60s, 70s, there was a man called Schmitter, who may be recalled, I think, to his credit, who spoke about something like corporatism, meaning you didn't basically exist unless the state said, yeah, the Association of Veterinarians hereby now exists in India. I think not a minor point then or now, so that some of the conditions of felicity certainly have to do with who is recognized as a proper actor. And that recognition all too often, better or worse, does come from states, although I think in that regard, say, Celestine's point has to be connected to the second point by Archon, yes, on the question of the sources of these things, because they're obviously not all state sources for, let's call it, recognition. So we may say Schmitterian corporatism needs to be maybe updated with Taylorian recognition to say that the joint effect of making groups real speakers comes from multiple sources depending on the historical context. But certainly, whichever way it happens, it's very important to identify when speakers develop the capacity to speak at all, and then to perform those failures that over time may have some yield. So I think we may be zeroing in more and more on what the things are that we need to attend to. A last quick comment on sincerity, and a very important point that Jane made that I very much would like to go back to, and coordination and the game theoretic angle, is to say that these kinds of performatives may actually have a lot of effect on the kind of thing that Tom Schelling did in micromotives and macro behavior, but by altering, let's say, the general conditions of felicity, or of, if you like, of sincerity. That is, a change the conditions under which people are perceived as being more or less sincere. That also is a kind of coordination exercise. So there may be space for these kind of loser performances in that more rigorous Schelling type approach, in which I have a lot of interest as well. Well, fine, that's all I can do, but thanks again for a terrific set of responses.
Thanks, Arjun.